Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenny Homfransen from 3AF, and thank you for joining the second webinar in our fall webinar series. And before I turn things over to Tricia San Diego from AARP, I wanted to share a little bit about 3AF. But first of all, today's webinar is on AANHPI, Family Caregiving. Are we ready? Please note that we are recording today's session. The webinar will be about 45 minutes, and then you're going to be able to chat with us in the chat box. Feel free to type in your questions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to share a little bit about 3AF before we begin. I know some of you are familiar with us and others of you may not be. So 3AF is the largest national organization in Asian advertising, Asian marketing, and the power of the Asian American consumer. We are a national trade association, and we're made up of people involved in our industry. So marketers, media, advertising agencies, PR firms, other industry vendors and partners. But our main goal is to be champions for the Asian Pacific Islander American consumer opportunity. Next slide, please. One of our biggest events is the 3AF Asian Marketing Summit. It's the largest national conference focusing on the Asian consumer. And these are pictures below. We actually had our first in-person summit this May. So excited to be back in person. It was at the Japanese American National Museum. We had about 150 attendees, two jam-packed days full of sessions, 19 in fact, and we even had a special screening of Disney's American-Born Chinese. So if you are interested in the Asian segment, I hope you'll be able to attend our summit. We'll be having it in May 2024. Another project that we do every year is the Excellence Awards, where we honor the best and brightest work in our industry. And you'll see here on the slide, these are some of the categories where we award people, agencies, and marketers, because we really want to elevate and show the great things that they're doing in our industry. This event is usually held during the summit. So again, we'll be letting you know when the summit will be held next year, and we hope you can sign up and see you there. Another program that I wanted to mention is that we have 3F Next Gen Leaders. It is a program for our young up-and-coming talent in marketing, advertising, and overall in our industry. And it's really designed to help target and bring these rising leaders up into the corporate America and in the agencies. Really want to make sure that they rise above challenges that might happen in their careers. We actually do that with Asians in advertising. And this year we managed to pair 140 mentors and mentees, which is quite a lot. Okay, next slide. We also really believe in the power of minority media. These are a couple of initiatives that we are working on. I want to partner with the National MNSDC to help Asian media become certified. I think that that's a really critical area that we need to work on with our Asian media. After all, they're a conduit to our community. 3F is also working on a minority-owned media directory. Again, that's going to be a resource, we feel a strong resource for advertisers, brands, and marketers. Another thing I wanted to mention is, despite the fact that we're a small organization, we have managed to conduct our own marketing research. And those of you who are in the industry, you know how expensive marketing research can be. We did two studies, one in 2016, one in 2019. You'll find those links on our website. We also partnered with Nielsen. And this year, we are a sponsor of Hispanic Marketing Council's latest study, The Growing Power of the Multicultural Majority. That link is also on our website under the research section. And so I wanted to end with, I hope you'll come back to 3F. We are your resource when it comes to all things Asian. This is a short list of things that we can help you with as you're navigating your journey in the Asian market. We can do introductions. We have the latest marketing research, case studies, networking, speaking opportunities. We can help with RFPs. We do a lot of webinars. And basically, I hope you'll reach out to us if you need an expert or have any questions. Okay, so with that, I wanted to turn things over. We are excited to have Tricia San Diego join us. She is a senior advisor at AARP, and she's going to talk all about caregiving. Over to you, Tricia.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thanks to everyone for attending today and for those who are attending after the fact and sort of watching this after. Welcome, and thank you for joining this really important conversation. So I have a lot of acronyms right then and there. AANHPIs, which most of you may be familiar with, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders. That's who we're talking about, and family caregiving, the topic of family caregiving. We're going to give you some steps on how to kind of create a plan and get more prepared. For those of you who are not aware, we are AARP. That's who I represent. AARP's mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. And this is at no matter what age you are. And we are not just an organization actually for just those who are senior citizens or 50 plus. This is for anyone at any age, is what we do to empower people to be able to choose how they live as they age. And this is why AARP Family Caregiving supports all who provide care for their loved ones, all the way from Gen Z to boomers, no matter what age you are. Oops, sorry about that. Most caregivers, whether they're working or they're balancing other duties, do have a juggle, a bit of a struggle and a juggle. And I think we're going to talk through how you can kind of navigate through that today in today's session. Thanks, Jenny, for the introduction. I'm Tricia San Diego again, AARP Senior Advisor for our programs, Caregiving and Health team. I specifically work in employer outreach activities and partnership work, and we just want to influence stakeholders, including yourselves, to become more aware of the topic of family caregiving. Family caregivers are the backbone of our healthcare system and our long-term care system, and it's only going to increase through time. I would love for you all to take a moment. We're a nice intimate group here, and drop in the chat. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What's your name? Are you currently a caregiver? Are you someone who provides care for someone else in any capacity, whether that be with medical related issues or transportation or financial issues? All of those activities that you may do to help a loved one actually make you a caregiver. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily identify with that term, but if you are someone who is a caregiver, let me know who you're caring for. I'll start. So I gave my introduction. I'm Tricia. I am currently a caregiver right now. I think of all my credentials and sort of background that I have in health education, public health, very much steeped in the field. I think my biggest credential is the fact that I am a caregiver myself. I take care of my aging parents, who my father is in his mid 80s and he suffers from Parkinson's disease. And then my mother is in her late 70s and has an autoimmune condition. And they live close by to me, not with me, but close by, about 20 minutes. And I have siblings, and we are in the throes of it, I would say. I have young children that I take care of, my son and my daughter. And then I have my own family as well, my husband, that I provide care for. So you're not alone. And this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn the significance of being an Asian caregiver. I'll sort of shorten that acronym and just refer it to Asian moving forward for this purpose of this presentation. I'm going to equip you with tips for self-care while being a caregiver, because it's a lot. I don't know if any of you experience challenges with caregiving or feel the pressure and the amount of stress that it can take on, in addition to the joys and the rewards of being part of this responsibility. But you do need to make sure to take time for yourself. And then we'll also give you resources to help you with your caregiving task, not just for caring for yourself, but also for your loved one. So what is so unique about the experience of Asian caregivers? They are twice as likely to care for their elders than the general population. So they over-index in that regard. Showing respect for one's elders is a common cultural practice of Asians. We know the concepts of things like filial piety. That's a very highly regarded philosophy in Asian culture. And we know that that is part of one's duty, one's obligation in order to sort of pay respects for our elders. Asians are more likely to prefer to care for their elders at home and opt out of institutional care, which is purely a personal choice whether or not you do that. And we're not going to, tell one group of people to do it one way or the other. But we know that there's pros and cons to both, sort of caring for someone at home as well as caring for someone and having them live in a facility. More figures. 73% of Asians, more than any other ethnic group, another area where we over-index, believe that caring for parents is expected of them. It's not really a choice. It's something that you have to do, a part of that duty, part of that obligation. Many Asians don't consider themselves as caregivers, as it is just an expected role in life. I talked about that idea of self-identification, and that term caregiver sometimes has this connotation of mostly just being associated with being a paid caregiver. For example, are you a home health aide or someone working in the nursing profession? And that's not necessarily the case. When AARP is referring to family caregivers, that's referring to those of us who are caring for a loved one, whether that be at home, in the same home that you live in, whether that be they live somewhere else, or even if they live long distance. That makes you a caregiver if you're, managing some sort of activity of daily living on behalf of someone else. So it's hard because sometimes things that are marketed towards caregivers may not resonate with those of us who don't associate with that term. I'm a daughter. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a neighbor. I'm not necessarily a caregiver. No, that's not me. Before I took this job at AARP, that's exactly how I was. I could never really relate with that term and never thought I was a caregiver until I learned more and got a definition of it and understood the things that we do for our loved ones. It does actually make you have this other hat, and it is work. So it's essentially another job in lots of ways on top of your full-time or daytime jobs or part-time daytime jobs that you may have. Lastly, 72% of Asians feel they should be doing or should have done more for their parents. So this goes back into emotions. We hear a lot about feelings of guilt or regrets. What could you have done? What more could you have done? A lot of us give so much of ourselves, our time, our money, our energy level in order to provide care for our loved ones. And sometimes you wish you could do more, but I am here to kind of tell yourselves to give yourself grace. It's hard to do everything. We can't be everything to everyone. And sometimes perfection is the enemy of good. And so I think we do need to become a little bit more socialized with the fact that, you do your best, and that should be good enough. And you just want to cherish the time that you have with your loved ones and not be so focused on that sort of guilt, and just try to think about like all that you want to do in order to help that one that doesn't sacrifice your own financial, mental, emotional, physical health. When we talk about the sandwich generation, I certainly am someone who relates to that generation. Sandwich generation means you're caring for elders, people sort of above the generation, above your current generation, and then under those who were younger. So myself, I mentioned I have young children at home in elementary school, and then I also care for my parents and my in-laws, and that's fine. That's just sort of how my family is, and it's the role that I play. We call it sandwich because you're kind of squished in between these layers and you're sort of that middle meat part. But in lots of ways, we like to refer to this as the panini generation because you sometimes feel that pressure of being squished. Another analogy is being pulled in different directions, but I like the sort of panini generation because you just kind of feel that pressure on you. 17% of Asians live in multi-generational households, compared to 7% for the total population. So we're seeing a lot of trends of sort of the younger children, grandchildren taking care of grandparents, for example. Even if they're not the primary caregiver, and maybe you are, Your children may be secondary caregivers to your loved ones, to your relatives. We also see this extended family reach out, where you have cousins, aunts, uncles, other relatives in the mix that are very much part of the sort of Asian household and help provide that support. So most Asian caregivers do expect to be a caregiver for someone over the next 5 years. And many of them are, perhaps living in these multi-generational households or have these extended relatives that they may be providing care for or that they may be receiving help from. Asians are more likely than any other racial and ethnic group to, one, talk to doctors on behalf of their loved ones, whether that's a language barrier, a translation issue, or just a cognitive thing where you want to be there to be able to remember and hear the directions that healthcare providers have. A lot of us are advocating and negotiating those doctor-patient relationships on behalf of our loved ones. And we know, doctors are busy, healthcare providers are busy. It's hard to really ask all the questions that you want to get asked. And so sometimes you have to be the one to be there to make sure that they get asked. And that can take on a lot. A lot of us are contributing financially to the care of your loved one. We did an out-of-pocket study, out-of-pocket cost study with our research team last year, and we found that on average, family caregivers spend $7,000 out of pocket on goods and services to help provide care for their loved ones. $7,000, and if you're a long-distance caregiver, that number often goes up to close to $12,000, $11,000, $12,000 out of pocket. Imagine if you're sort of early in your career and early in your prime earning years at work. $7,000, $12,000 can be a large percentage of your income. And so those out-of-pocket costs can add up, and those are costs that you're contributing to year after year. A lot of us are also handling bills and paperwork. There's sort of this notion of financial caregiving and dealing with the legal aspects of caregiving. And that is a role that many of us do play. We have this slide, it's called the typical Asian caregiver, but I know that there's not really such thing in terms of a typical because caregivers are as diverse as they come, but there are some commonalities, and so we'll mention them here, but I know I sort of can elaborate on each of these points to show that the state of caregiving is so diverse, and there's all different permutations in terms of who you're caring for, how far they are, what their financial situation is, what their healthcare condition is, and so, and where you are in your life. And so everyone's caregiving journey is very unique. We say if you've met one caregiver, you've met one caregiver. But we do know that there are some commonalities, some things that you may have in common with other caregivers. Typically, this is just on average. We have people on either end of the spectrum, but the average age is 49.3 years old. On average, Asians have a higher education and household income than other racial and ethnic groups. And this can kind of go against us in terms of that model minority myth that, oh, you guys are doing so well that you don't need help. When really you need to learn to take a step back and recognize signs of burnout, signs of stress, when you really do need help, it's okay to ask for that help. You don't always have to be a model minority doing it all and doing it all perfectly and all on your own. Usually you have help from other unpaid caregivers. I mentioned this idea and notion of extended family. Sometimes you have that help. Sometimes you have neighbors, sort of boots on the ground if you're a long distance caregiver. But other times you don't have help, or sometimes you can't rely on other family members who you expected to maybe and perhaps couldn't. There's a lot of sort of family relationship dynamics at play. And so again, there's the whole spectrum of whether or not you have support. Many of us are working a part-time or full-time paid daytime job while providing care. And the care that you're providing, although it's certainly work, it's certainly a job, it's most likely unpaid. So 61% of all family caregivers in the US, there's 48 million family caregivers in the US, 61% of us actually do work full-time or part-time. And so that balance of work during the day and then having to provide that extra care outside of work hours, or sometimes in the middle of work hours at the same time work is happening. It's quite a juggle and a struggle. And so that's another uh, trait to see in family caregivers. Reports, many caregivers reports having to take a leave of absence for work more than non-Hispanic white caregivers. So more than the general market population, Asians do have these sort of impacts on your full-time or part-time daytime job. And you're more likely to ask for non-English language materials. The diversity of different languages that we have across the Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander culture, there's so many different languages, and sometimes we need those materials. And so we are asking more for those trans-created resources that can help us provide that education to our loved ones. So that was sort of the state of family caregiving among AANHPI populations. And now I want to just quickly go through a framework that AARP has for you all. If you are a caregiver or something that you want to increase awareness of to others who, although may not be caregivers now, will be at some point in their lives. We know a famous quote from former First Lady Rosalind Carter. She said, "There's only 4 different kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who are in need of care." So looking at all those different 4 types of people at any given moment, we are most likely one of those. And so caregiving really does touch on everyone. And it is something we want to increase awareness of, that there are struggles and joys and rewards to caregiving, but that family caregivers need help if we're going to rely on them to be that backbone of our long-term care system in the US. So this is a framework, because there's no one-size-fits-all approach that we can prescribe to you all, because you all have your own unique caregiving journeys. This framework is just to help people get their bearings on where they are in their caregiving journey, and to take a step back if they're already in the throes of it. This isn't just for those preparing to be a caregiver, but you may already be in the throes of it and just needing to regroup, reassess, take a breather. This is a framework to kind of check through some of the things that maybe you haven't thought of, and can help you approach your caregiving so that you have a plan in place and you can plan and evolve that plan anytime you are in your journey. The first step we have in our framework is about starting that conversation, which I know can be more difficult than said. Sometimes you need to start the conversation by looking for an opening. Many people know and acknowledge that this is a difficult conversation to have. It can be an awkward conversation to have. Some of us are superstitious and we don't want to even think about this conversation. It's not an easy task. And so I think the initial hurdle of just starting it is probably going to be the hardest part. And then you want to have these conversations early and often, because you want to keep checking in. Things change, lifestyle changes, health conditions change through time. And so here's where you want to start that conversation and just sort of set the ground for where important documents are, what wishes are for the future, and you want to make sure you respect your loved one's wishes and have conversations to communicate and talk through them. You want to assess the situation. What's the current state and what's the future state that you want to get to? Remember, your loved one who you are starting the conversation with is the person who's at the center of this conversation. So you do need to practice listening. And a lot of times we are switching roles, and it's a role reversal, and it can be awkward because of some of the topics that you have to talk about. One of the topics here being things like finances. Sometimes we don't want to talk about money. Sometimes that's very private and confidential to us. And so, you do want to make sure that you address it. I talked about those out-of-pocket costs, and you want to make sure you are aware of what assets are available for your loved one out of their own assets before you dig into your own. You want to know where their bank accounts are, where their investments are, things like beneficiary designation. Is all of that in place? What insurance coverage do they have? What types of insurance do they have? And then is there other finances, assets, or income to consider? A lot of times you may get resistance. I know firsthand what that feels like. I have one loved one who's very practical, and it was a very straightforward conversation to have, and another one where we're still having the conversation. We're still trying to chip away and peel the onion and get to where we really want to get to, but we don't want to drive them away. But at the same time, you just have to keep trying in lots of ways. A lot of times you just hear, I just don't want to talk about it. But they need to understand, your loved one, that this is about practicality in lots of ways, and just making sure you're all prepared and doing what they want so that you make sure that you're doing what's best for them. I'd love for you to drop in the chat if you have any, or take a moment to reflect on your own situation. What has worked for you to start the conversation? This is our points of interaction and engagement. You're welcome to share with us here in the chat, or if you just want to think about and take a moment to be like, what would work in my own situation if you're going through it? Have a moment of reflection so you can kind of be more prepared. The next step in our framework is about forming your team. This is not an overly formal team, but these are all the people who are going to help you in your caregiving role. You want to look for team members who live nearby to the loved one that needs care. You need those boots on the ground. Caregiving is very local. Is it as so local as you need like a neighbor to help take out someone's trash for them because it's too heavy and they have mobility issues? Is it someone who needs to drive them places? So these are important things to think about. You want help with even the simplest of tasks all the way to the most complex of tasks. Like I said, taking out the trash, fairly straightforward, fairly simple, but could be a big help to someone if you're a caregiver. Even things like sharing their talents, you do want to match up your team members with the things that they are skilled and knowledgeable of. That's how you can create success, is match up the strengths. If you have an accountant or someone in the financial industry in your family, perhaps they may be the best person for managing the finances of your loved one. In my family, my brother is the cook. He is so much better at preparing meals and cooking. So he's the one who's preparing meals and freezer meals and that kind of thing for my loved ones. I can do it, but it's not my biggest strength. So why am I going to, stress out worrying about, getting things done right when my brother enjoys doing it and is good at it? Building and supporting that team, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, kind of bringing from that cooking reference, but you want to see who can be in supportive roles, who can be a leader, who can really quarterback the situation, and then you want to see how many people you have at play, and then assign roles and responsibilities based on strengths and preferences. You don't want to assign someone and force them to do something that they really hate doing, because that will wear someone out. Sometimes you have to, sometimes these are just things we have to do that no one wants to do, but maybe take turns doing those tasks that no one likes. And you want to focus again on the care recipient. What are their wishes? Again, a moment of reflection. Who's on your team? Are your siblings helpful? Do you have siblings that can help you out? Is it cousins? Is it your coworkers? Is it your boss? Is it your faith-based community who's helping you? Who can you think of that can be helpful in your situation? Don't forget people like your healthcare providers of your loved one, the doctors. You want to be on the same team as them. The third step is making the plan. And I mean, actually document a plan. You want to hold a team meeting. This might sound intimidating because it might be a little too formal sounding, but I feel like you can make this as informal, as formal as you need to be, but it is helpful to sort of document and write this down so everyone on the team is on the same page, including the care recipient, and that everyone's clear about roles and responsibilities and that there's no confusion. And as I said, your life changes, your healthcare needs change, your living situation changes. So the plan evolves. And so it's helpful to have it documented so you see where the areas are that you need change. You want to have a meeting with your team. Maybe it's over Sunday family dinner. Maybe you actually want to do a Zoom call if everyone is long distance. You want to assess the goals and needs of your plan. Are you trying to do the whole enchilada and crack out, the whole plan? Or are you just crank out the whole plan? Or are you just trying to focus on one area of need right now? And let's focus on that part of the plan. And then again, you want to assign the roles and responsibilities and tasks to the different people of your team and delegate where possible. If you're the primary caregiver and you're that quarterback person, it's a big responsibility. And so you don't have to be everything to everyone. And if other people are willing to help, definitely give them tasks that you feel comfortable giving them. You want to make a plan for the team meeting itself, include the person who will receive the care, keep everyone informed of the plan, and take those notes. So here's that documentation aspect of it. I don't want to breeze by the fact that I'm saying include the person who will receive care. A lot of times we do feel like we know better and they don't understand the times or they don't know what they want, but you really want to hear their voice and listen to them. Another moment of reflection, what has worked for you when making a plan? And if you haven't already done the plan, that's okay. You have time to do so now. What's going to be your first step? We want to find support. And this is a little bit different from team because your team is sort of your core nucleus of who are going to be all the people at play, mostly on a day in, day out type of thing where there's big major tasks. Finding support is when you kind of need a break or you're just reached your max capacity and you need respite care or you need someone else to step in or you're deciding that you cannot sustain this level, this pace anymore. Who can you turn to? Well, there's community resources and there's professional help. Community resources can be places like nonprofit disease management groups, places like the Alzheimer's Association or the American Cancer Society or the American Diabetes Association. A lot of those organizations that are nonprofit will be credible, trusted sources of information that likely have caregiving information for you to help you navigate what you're going through and what your loved one's going through when it comes to their diagnosis. You may also want to look at faith-based communities or cultural organizations in your community where you can find other caregivers going through the same thing that you're going through. Maybe you'll find support groups helpful. And then there's professional help. Talk to a counselor. Maybe you need a family therapist. Maybe you need to talk to your doctor because the stress is actually having physical manifestations on your own self. So leverage all of these opportunities. I will, because I happen to, know more a little bit about the employer channel, I will say, look at your employer. What benefits do you have through your company? Some organizations have great supportive benefits for family caregivers, and they recognize that you're balancing your daytime job with this sort of unpaid additional job that you're doing caring for a loved one. Do you have something like an employee assistance plan where you can leverage counseling sessions for free that are confidential and private? Do you have stress workshop type things? Do you have respite care, backup care services through your organization? Sometimes healthcare coverage benefit will also have a caregiving related benefit. So here are just some of the examples that I elaborated on. You can also look into hiring help. And that is not an admission of failure if you say that you need help. It is, I think, something to commend yourself for, to say it's okay if you can't do it all. Because if you do it all, something will fall. And one of the balls that you're juggling will fall. And it's going to maybe not be the best care that you're providing for your loved one if you are insisting that you do it yourself. So it's okay to hire help if you have the resources and the ability to do that. You want to secure their safety. So look at the home environment if that's where they choose to live. Look at the facility if that's where they choose to live. And you want to make sure that their physical environment is safe. So things like falls prevention, things that are accessible and reachable. Mobility does get a little bit difficult as you age. And so are they able to access the things that they need to use on a day-to-day? If someone's a wanderer, you want to make sure things like sensors or certain locks are in place just to make sure that they don't wander off. You want to explore those housing options and have that discussion. I know we said many Asian families do not do a lot of the facility-based care and tend to opt out, but it's okay. Again, don't feel guilty if that's what you feel like is going to be best for you and your loved one and your family. but explore all the different options out there. There's all different types. And then you want to look at those support groups. So what has worked for you to find support? Personally, I will say and answer this question, I have found that knowing other caregivers in my situation has been so helpful, just for venting purposes, just for, if you wanted to just throw ideas out on how to navigate a certain caregiving problem and you need help and you just want to see if they've gone through it. Having that experience of other caregivers has been really helpful. So it is a good sense of camaraderie when you find someone else in the same boat. The last step I'll talk about is self-care, and this should not be the last step. This should be a step that you're doing throughout your whole caregiving journey. And here are several tips that you can talk about. We have some resources to share with you, but tap into those resources. It's okay to use them. Use things like technology so you can automate when possible. Can you just order groceries online through an app or through the website versus you physically having to go? Is that going to help your situation? I talked about your employer or even your loved one's employer. If they have benefits that you can leverage or retiree coverage or benefits that can be helpful. Take a look at finances, both your loved ones and your own, and really try to kind of keep it separate and not dig into your pocket if you don't have to. Leverage all the benefits and assets that your loved one has for their own care. Talk to your doctor. Advocate for yourself. If you are, at your limit and you can't take it anymore, advocate for yourself. Say, nope, someone else in this family needs to step up for now. I cannot do this. And that's not a wrong thing to do. Take advantage of caregiving services and supports. That last step I talked about, what you have available in the community. And then make sure you take a break. Give yourself grace. Take a breather. Don't beat yourself up. I know a lot of the guilt and regret that you may have if you wish you could do more, but sometimes, perfection is the enemy of good, and you need to be okay with sort of good enough just so that everyone can kind of keep head above water. But make sure you carve out that time, even if it's just 5 minutes to meditate or take a walk outside, or if you need to sleep or to go to your doctor's appointment, that's all okay. So here's some quick resources that I'll go through, and then I'd love to answer any questions. So think about any questions that you may have, and you're welcome to drop them in the chat. AARP has a financial workbook for caregivers. This is a workbook. It is very much a hands-on practical guide on how you can manage your finances as well as the finances of your loved one. And so be prepared to put pen to paper, and you can write things down like your monthly budget or document where things are in terms of banking accounts or other assets. So this is an incredible resource. We have the QR code there. You can scan, but you can also access this at aarp.org/care-money-guide. Another resource from today is our Prepare to Care workbook. That's the wrong resource. Sorry, the wrong link. It should be aarp.org/work-and-care. We have this resource in Chinese. We have it for Asian American general population. We have an English version. We have a Spanish version, military veteran family caregiver version. So we have this transcreated in multiple versions, and I hope you can find one that resonates well with your family, and you can distribute it to your loved ones and create awareness of it. This is a practical booklet to document all the things that I captured, and it's a great starting point for making that care plan that we talked about. These are other resources very specific to AAPI, and I'm just going to not read them off, but just show them on here, and we'll be able to share them at the end of the session as well. But we have all these different resources to really help people in our own community, and take a look. There's a whole wide range there. I just wanted to summarize before we get to questions what we talked about today. I kind of gave the state of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander family caregivers in the US right now. We know as time goes, more and more people are going to step into this caregiving role, and that we're going to need more help and support. So one way to approach caregiving is to use our framework. 5 steps to create a caregiving plan. We talked about starting the conversation, forming your team, making that plan, finding support, and caring for yourself. Those are all very critical no matter where you are in your caregiving journey. And then we talked about those resources. So, Jenny, I'll turn it back to you. And I do want to say thank you, everyone, for joining. And let me know if there's any questions.
Super. Thank you, Trisha. I really appreciated your comments. Two things. I like the Rosalind Carter quote because I think when I heard you list all those, it's basically everyone, right? We're all going to be
Right.
caregiving at some point, and this is really part of life. And then I just also wanted to thank you for that panini reference because I always used to say we're in the sandwich generation, right? We're in between. We got to take care of our kids and our parents, but panini is just so much more expressive because there is pressure. We feel that pressure on top of us as we're juggling our lives. So I want to thank you and AARP for all the great work that you do. And just this session was amazing. So we are going to open the floor for questions. You can put your questions in the chat box and I could read them out loud for Trish. And also, Trisha, I wanted to ask you while we're waiting for questions to come in, you mentioned that you're dealing with your siblings, and I have siblings too, and it's not easy. There's like these family dynamics, and from when you were little, that kind of transpire as adults. What would your advice be to I don't know, best manage doing that? You want to make sure people play a role, and not one person has to do everything. But what's your
Right.
advice?
That's a really good question because we all approach things differently. Even though we came from the same gene pool, right? We have such different ways on how to approach problems and issues. And I think my biggest advice is to manage the expectations and to respect how people cope and respect the differences in how people cope, and that people may very well have those boundaries and those limits. So what may look like, I don't want to have anything to do with caring for our parents, I don't love them, I don't care for them, is really a coping mechanism for them to deal
Yeah.
with a highly emotional thing. So giving your loved ones grace, although it can come with a side of resentment sometimes, let's be honest. But just know that we're all built differently, and they have different ways to cope in avoiding or stepping away or knowing where their boundaries are their limits. Some other people have higher capacity to take on more stuff. Sometimes they thrive on taking on more stuff. So there is this sort of balance at play. But certainly, I want to recognize it's not always easy, and family
Yeah.
dynamics do come into play. And that's when these things like the counseling sessions or the family therapy sessions might be helpful to actually come together as a group and talk to a third party and try to approach a problem or a situation so that we have mutual understanding of each other. But sometimes we expect and rely, and it doesn't always happen. So you don't get that support that you need, and rather than belaboring over it, sometimes you just need to find another solution if what you expected wasn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as Asian Americans, we just have these extra challenges, I feel. You mentioned
Yeah.
them when you started the presentation. And basically, you're not supposed to ask for help or, you know, eh, eh, just kind of not know what to do. You're supposed to know.
Yeah,
No,
you're just
it's
supposed to
it's
be able
difficult.
to handle it all. And again,
Yeah.
those notions of the model minority and us handling it all, it will lead to burnout, and it's not a sustainable pace. And
No.
so that's just what I wanted to say. We always talk about the more you can help yourself with your own health, and I'm talking about financial, emotional, mental, physical health, there actually is documented better health outcomes for the care recipient. So you cannot neglect yourself, and you cannot sort of put your own stuff aside in order to provide help, because there is this correlation of positive benefits to your loved one, if that's ultimately who you care for the most, if you're making sure you take care of yourself. The best
Yeah.
analogy is the airplane and the oxygen mask. Every safety briefing at the beginning, they always tell you you
Tell you
have
to
to
put it
put
on yourself. Yeah.
first on yourself, because
Yeah.
what good are you
Yeah.
if you have a low tank or whatever, and you're trying to put it on somebody else or help somebody else.
Right. Right. Good point. Oh, okay. So I don't see any questions. I'm gonna wait maybe. Oh, okay. Don't see any questions. All right. Well, we're just about out of time. Again, Trisha, I wanted to thank you for sharing your expertise and insights, very helpful information. We will be posting this on our website for others to see as well. Some announcements that I have. Those of you who are going to be at Advertising Week New York, it's October 16th to 19th. 3AF has actually two events. One, we will be having a session. Iris Yim from 3AF and Nancy Tellett from Hispanic Marketing Council will be speaking. It's a session called The Growing Power of the Multicultural Majority. That's on October 18th. And then also that evening, we're having a 3AF networking event, 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. You can find out more information on our website. It's called 3AF Asian Mosaic. If you'd like to attend, reach out to us, and then you can be put on the wait list. And then I wanted to mention our next webinar is October 25th. The title is Balance of Work and Woke, and the featured speakers are Nielsen, McDonald's, and IW Group. So hope you can join us there. So again, Tricia, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And everyone, thank you all for joining. See you at the next webinar.